Okay, so here we are. Aloha. This is Gabe Morales with Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians, new channel that's affiliated with Criminal Justice Solutions. So if you like what you have seen so far as our videos and our guests and subject matter, please make sure you hit the thumbs up and the subscribe button. We really appreciate that. So today we'll be speaking with a man who I've known for quite a while, who quite a few years back. He's a very dynamic speaker, and I've had the pleasure of working with him before, teaching at conferences with him, and we have communicated many times over the years uh, as far as gang matters. He's on the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast. I mean, like way far West Coast now here in Hawaii. So thank you for coming in today. He is a gang prevention specialist with over 30 years experience, and he is also great at intervention with young people. I've seen that personally, that he has affected their lives. So please help me welcome Mr. Ronald Cook Barrett.
Thank you, Gabe. Appreciate you having me, brother.
All right, how you doing?
Good, buddy. You know what I'm saying? Just it's trying times here where we're at as far as the streets. So we've been dealing with a lot of homicides in the last month. That sort of was just taking everybody back, trying to figure this out. So with the pandemic, man, the family's healthy, so thank goodness on that end, and one day at a time with that. But work-wise, like I said, work-wise, it's a trying time because we have a lot of violence going on, especially in the inner cities, and we're trying to grasp it and slow it down because summer's not even here yet. And
most definitely, I know that it's a kind of like the perfect storm, the pandemic, people cooped up, getting on each other's nerves, that energy, pent up energy, especially with young people. We know that, recreation, and I know you're a big believer in that, releasing that energy through positive activities and recreation. And they haven't been able to do that as much this year. And then plus we have, a lot of law enforcement that are feeling they are getting the beat down and demoralized. And so that we've had other sessions on that subject. That's not the subject today, but depolicing, I think, is very real here in America. So before we get into some of those subjects, Cook, can you tell us where you were born and where you grew up?
Albany, capital of Albany, Albany, New York is home, and it's sort of we're like a microcosm of New York. They call New York City the Big Apple. We're sort of the Little Apple because, we're 2 hours north and got a lot of the same influences goes down in the bigger city. So Albany's born and raised, and then went down to New York to do some schooling, and that's where, the other education came in, and I really got hands-on on what I'm doing today. So been in New York, born and bred.
Right on, brother. So when you were growing up, did you encounter any gang members?
Well, I mean, being a metropolis, being a small city, and, as you got pockets of different ethnic groups, so we always dealt with the concept of, what neighborhoods were from where and, what neighborhoods contained what people. So, we had our groups, we had our areas where, our downtown areas and our uptown areas, some cities got east side versus west side, south side, north side. Albany had a traditional problem with downtown versus uptown. So as you grew up in the neighborhood, you knew where you were, you knew through the school districts, you knew through the breakdown of the city of, what kids were from what pockets, what they were called. We had non-traditional names, obviously, like everybody else. So we always had our group of friends that, were together for that sense of protection, that sense of belonging. So, the gangs, as we see today, obviously wasn't really hitting strong. I mean, New York, as you know, has a big history. A big history, but it was maybe, basically neighborhood based. So yes, we've seen what we had in our communities. We knew when you cross a certain avenue, a certain street, that you were in somebody else's neighborhood. But back then, Gabe, to be honest with you, we used our sports to sort of get through that. We had football games against different neighborhoods. So if you were from uptown, from a certain area, and we were downtown kids, and I grew up downtown, we would meet behind a local high school and say, bring your best 11. We got our best 11. We're going to play football. And you take it out in a game of football. Then you travel to a different pocket in the city and you play that neighborhood in a game of football. So we had our outlets, but we didn't have the traditional stuff you're seeing today where kids pulling out guns and taking lives.
Yeah. No, definitely things have definitely changed. I can totally relate. If we did, it was rare to have violence, but if we did, it was one-on-one, man up, hand to hand, type of combat, throwing fists, and
Oh,
then
yeah, like I said,
when
that
it was
traditional,
over, I have some very good friends that we got into some altercations, but we became good friends after that. You know, you cleaned
yeah,
up your bloody nose, and you moved on. It
that's
was
right.
another day, but
Yeah,
times have changed.
earn your respect that way. And like I said, that was the best way to do it. Unfortunately, things have definitely changed.
Yeah. So, what made you then decide to get into prevention intervention work?
While I was working in a school district, a middle school, I just returned from New York City where I seen firsthand what was going on. You know, Latin Kings were starting to emerge in '86. And we started seeing those traditional gangs that obviously are national, and New York City was huge. Coming up here to Albany, coming back to Albany, we started seeing our uptown and our downtown kids emulate a lot of what they saw and what they've been hearing in music and everything else. So now all of a sudden I'm seeing our kids flagging. We never saw the flagging before. You know, the kids now got the bandanas in the pockets, the same swagger you saw in the big city. So when we saw that in our middle school section, we started having issues with these kids. I was one of the individuals doing interventions at the time with the kids, working security in the school district. And by doing the interventions, I became very versed on who was with who, what they were representing. We knew the culture was now embedded in our city a lot deeper than we thought. The prevention work wasn't being done. We were still in the denial stage. You know, a lot of, you know, the mayors and a lot of people involved in the bureaucracy really didn't want to say there's a gang issue. Because, you know, as you know, once you say there's a gang issue, the Pandora box is open and, well, what's being done about this issue and everything else. So the denial was very, very big in our area.
Right. And not
So,
only what are you going to do about it, but where's the money going to come from? And sometimes they
exactly.
don't want to deal with that.
You know, whose problem is this? So I sort of stood on the back, worked with the kids in the schools. Through the mediations, now I got the lay of the land on how serious it was, because these kids were now coming in with weapons into the school. The fights were turning into shootings outside. The homicides were getting younger and younger. And I really saw nothing was really being done proactively on the gang issue. I said to myself, well, what could I do on a bigger scale than what I was doing with the school districts? And then we approached the city, and city at the time was getting proactive. There was a lot of grants because the gang issues in the East Coast were really blowing up. So DCJS, Criminal Justice Services, as we have here on the East Coast, started putting out a lot of gang prevention grants. Our City of Albany Department of Youth put in for a grant. This was, 1999. I was called, asked if I'd be, you know, interested in possibly taking a civil service test to get this position. I took the test. There was, 16 of us in the room. I was blessed to score the highest, got interviewed with everybody. Everybody, what I mean by that was the mayor at the time of our city, the police chief of the city, the school board, just a lot of the stakeholders in the city, so they could see what I brought to the table, what I bring to the table, and if I was the right candidate. I got hired in 1999 to run this gang prevention program just for the city of Albany. I wanted to do things, as I said earlier, on a bigger scale. You know, I wanted more drop-in programs for these kids. I wanted to start doing some stuff with trauma. I wanted to really start affecting the roots of a lot of the issues that we're seeing that are causing these kids to look for the alternative family. So when I started the grant in '99, it was basically through the Department of Youth. So we had a lot of resources in the city, wraparound services. Now was the time to overcome the denial, go into the neighborhoods and educate the people, talk to the community about the issue, how the community could be proactive about the issue. Because as you know, most people think solving gangs is a police issue. They think suppression, suppression, suppression. And I sort of had to tell the communities and the members of the communities and the families that, listen, you have to play a major, major part in this. You know, the family has to be able to identify, the community has to identify, you're seeing the graffiti, you're seeing the stuff in the community that we can hopefully get proactive and sort of slow down a little bit. And if you can play your part as a community member, then the police can play their part in suppression. We'll do some intervention work. And with those three, you know, prongs of the dinosaur, as we call it, with, you know, intervention, prevention, and suppression, you know, we're never going to stop the gang problem, but we can keep a lid on a boiling pot. So a lot of it was just being proactive and educating. The first 2 years was just educating and awareness programs. Then once we got through that, we said, okay, what can we do on the intervention end? We started offering a lot of programs for kids. We got involved with programs like Youth Build. We did a lot of collaborations with, just pro-youth agencies that really had resources for kids and wanted to build with kids in our community. Because as I tell people, the gang issue we dealt with is different from the West Coast. It's different from, 400 miles away from different cities. So we had to educate people is use local resources for your local problem. A lot of people would look outside to the West Coast about bringing somebody to the East Coast to talk about the gang issue and see if we can get some answers. But to me, you really got to use local resources to deal with your local problem, because a lot of these problems differ. There's a lot of different aesthetics to this. So once we got done with the awareness and we knew that time for the intervention issues, it was, okay, what programs can we offer for these kids? What wraparound services can we have on a one-stop, so individual who may want to either step away from this lifestyle or maybe just wants to get in a proactive program where they don't have to worry about the peer pressure to get involved in gangs. It was our turn now to open up these programs and allow kids, opportunities to be kids again.
Very good. Well, they definitely made a wise decision. I mean, that's your backyard, and you know what the problems are, and you know that what the resources are. I think it's very well said. To for prevention intervention folks to utilize what they have already, and then come up with things that maybe that are missing. But like we said, it does take some money, but mostly it takes people that care, like yourself, and that's not always easy to find people that have the time, and dedication to deal with this problem. So you had mentioned the youth services division, you mentioned the police. What other kind of agencies and associations do you work with?
Well, I mean, being an employee of the city of Albany for 16 years as a gang prevention specialist, I did a lot of trainings for most of our surrounding communities, police agencies like the Zone 5 Police Academy up here, New York State Police. I would do trainings for their incoming class. You name the youth agency, Gabe, as far as substance abuse programs, the shelters. I would work with everybody locally as far as doing educational programs and be there as a resource and vice versa, so they can work with our children. And if I can become a resource for them, I'm a phone call away to do intervention work. Obviously the Gang Investigators Associations, I started doing that, I want to say, gosh, it had to be back in 1997 when I was working for the school districts. We started a gang intervention task force within the schools. We were invited to a conference down in Poughkeepsie, New York, which is probably an hour and a half south of Albany, on the topic of gangs. At that training, I looked and saw that the individual that was running the training was Lou Savelli. And Lou did his training. I introduced myself to Lou after. We started to build a little bit, and we started talking to each other. He saw what I brought to the table as far as my passion and what I did, and asked me if I would like to be able to present to different agencies and organizations in New York and in the area. And in the future, we started doing some collaborations, and he gave me an opportunity to speak at some conferences. Wes Daly, rest in peace. Wes was big with the East Coast Gang Investigators, and Wes was the same way. Wes saw me speak. He asked me if I could one day speak at a gang conference. It was in Atlantic City for one of their nationals. And it put me on a platform there for one of the gang investigator associations, which was ECGIA. From there, New Jersey Gang Investigators, had their agency going, and Rosendo Perez. Rosendo gave me a call at the time and said, would you like to speak at a conference for New Jersey? And as you know, buddy, from there, it's sort of like a fraternity of speakers that, we go around NAGIA, we go around different gang investigators associations. We talk about whatever our quote unquote lane is, be it expertise. Mine at the time, obviously being prevention intervention, it was sort of rare at these gang conferences because most gang investigators conferences, they're, law enforcement focus about suppression.
Right.
What can we do about this problem? We got to lock this up, get it off our streets. I thought I gave a little bit of a different perspective where these officers in the audience can sort of change their lenses a little bit, because their kids are susceptible of being caught up in this lifestyle. I mean, I'd have, if I went through my caseload over the last 30 years, some of the professionals that I had their children on my caseload, people would be shocked. How could a lawyer's daughter be on your, stuff like that, So it hits everywhere. So I wanted to change the lenses at these conferences that, listen, this is an issue that's affecting everybody from rural areas, suburban areas, into the inner city areas, and hopefully motivate. I wanted to educate, obviously, at these conferences, but I really, as when I speak, I want to motivate. I really want individuals leaving that table saying, what can I do? That's why we do the each one, teach one concept. What can I do when I leave this room? Yes, to be the best law enforcement officer I can be, if they're law enforcement or probation or whatever they may be, corrections. But how can I sort of maybe change lenses and affect this individual's life, so maybe we take them away from the system? So instead of keeping a cycle from generation to generation, maybe I can impact this individual where they can make a positive change and make better choices, because I think that's what we're all here to do anyways, is to serve and leave this place a better place than when we got here.
Right. Well, that gets into my next question then. Can you think of a tough case, a kid that, man, you're thinking this guy's headed for the pen, that was maybe a success story that you worked with, and they were able to overcome the issues they were dealing with, and yeah, somebody maybe that you had dealt with directly, a success story. Can you think of? I know you have many, so can you
Yeah, I mean,
just mention one or two?
yeah, I mean, there are so many. I wish I could, like I said, put them all on blast right now because they deserve it. And I'm like a proud father when you work with these kids. I mean, I haven't. Geez, if I was to pinpoint, oh my goodness, Gabe. I
Maybe a
mean,
recent one.
well, a recent one is an individual that I is sort of like a mentee to me that speaks for the to the kids for me and stuff like that. Um, his name is Omar, and Omar's a young man who grew up in what we call the jungle in our community, which is right in the midst of everything. Could have went either way on the fork of the road. Was peer pressured in many ways. Kept staying to the right, making the right decisions. By doing that, I watched him grow into somebody who we call a rose in the cement. You know, you can grow roses in the cement in the hood. So he's our example of, growing a rose in the cement. Somebody who the odds are so stacked against you that you're not supposed to do anything. That as I speak to you today, he's a certified public accountant living in New Jersey, has his own business. And when he comes back and talks to these kids, he can put it in perspective about, listen, I grew up right in that house right by you, walked these same streets, had these same peer pressures, and I navigated this mess, and hopefully give them some tips on how to navigate this mess. And as you know, in this field, you need individuals like that. You need people that, are the credible messengers that said, listen, been there, done that. And this is what it took. It wasn't always happy. It wasn't always good times. It's going to be hard. You're going to catch the beat from everybody. And at the end result is you're your own man standing on your own 2 feet. And, that's what it's all about in this world.
Absolutely. Yeah, that feels great, man. And you know that, you didn't do it by yourself. They have to buy into the change element, the self change. But it really makes you feel good, man, when you say, hey, I at least assisted. I didn't impede. And
Yeah.
and speaking of obstacles and impediment, what kind of obstacles have you faced, if you don't mind saying, in doing your job? Sometimes it seems like there's some real haters out there, and sometimes I think it's institutional type of hurdles that
Oh, yeah.
make our job difficult.
Well, I mean, first, right off the bat, I mean, your viewers probably looking at this, see a bald-headed white guy. They probably think he's a detective or he's a cop. I mean, that's the profile, everybody's profiled in this world. So obviously me getting the reins of running a gang prevention program and being a Caucasian guy, yes, I may have some swag, yes, or whatever you want to say, but that was also a big obstacle because thank goodness I worked with the school districts and worked so deep with youth centers and stuff in the past in my community that a lot of people already knew of me. So when I did come and get a position and people said, they knew my nickname or they knew Cook, people already knew what I was about before I got this title. Once I got the title and we started doing gang prevention, you'd go into an African-American community and you're the white guy on stage talking about a gang problem. There's a lot of people in that audience that at first look at you like, number one, is he a police officer? Number one, why is he doing this? So the biggest obstacle has always been skin tone. I mean, that's always been, because I'm in a game right now and that, when it comes to gang prevention intervention specialists, there's not many Caucasians that are in this field, in urban America.
Right.
So
and have that street cred like I know you do. So
yes,
you just mentioned something I had meant to ask you in the beginning when I introduced you. How did you get the name Cook?
Baseball player Cookie Rojas. Right. Cookie Rojas played for the Kansas City Royals, Philadelphia Phillies. As a youngster, you play wiffle ball and you play stickball and you're in the streets playing all these games. And I used to write Cookie on the back of my T-shirt all the time. For Cookie Rojas it was just one of my, sort of like a Derek Jeter to kids today when you watch baseball or when he used to play. Right. So every time I got up there and I had a cousin, and one of my cousins, every time I was playing Little League ball, he'd be at the games and he'd say, come on, Cookie, and I would get so amped up just, hearing that and, ready to swing the bat because it was somebody I emulated. So from there, everybody was calling me Cook and Cookie. And that stuck with me for Jesus, Dave. I don't want to say my damn age right now, brother, but I mean, Jesus, if you ask most people, do you know Ron Barrett? They'll be like, who are you talking about? But if you say, oh, Cook Barrett, oh yeah, I know who Cook is. So it's just one of those nicknames that we all had growing up that stuck like Velcro on me. And it all came from a baseball player, Cookie Rojas.
Right on. So you have been around a while. We both have. We talked a little bit how the game has changed, how gangs have changed, but specifically there in New York, and tell us about how far New York City is, and they have developed than Albany, I'm sure. But what regionally, as far as New York and the East Coast, what kind of changes have you noticed over the years?
Well, I mean, on the culture part of it, obviously much more glamorized and mainstream, which has changed a lot in the game itself. And I think that's really changed gangs the most. When I say that, we went from traditional, you know, national gang problems, like, as you know, the history on the East Coast, Rikers Island was our quote unquote ground zero. You know, that's where all of our national gangs sort of started to grow, recruit, and become a power, where all of a sudden we saw the UBN, you know, the United Blood Nation on the East Coast, and Crips coming, and, you know, obviously Latin King. So all of those national gangs, they always existed in the boroughs, the 5 boroughs of New York City, because of the population and the diversity. Up here, upstate, you know, 2 hours north, we're mainly hybrid neighborhood-based gangs. New York, all of a sudden, because of the social media and because of the glamorization of this culture, buddy, just like Chicago, you started seeing a lot of these shot callers, a lot of these big groups get fractioned off, you know, obviously because of RICO cases and everything else that happened within law enforcement. And the younger generation didn't really want to abide by, okay, you know, we got to get the green light to shoot a gun at our rivals. These kids were like cowboys. And when we saw these national groups start to fraction with all these little subsets and all these little neighborhood hybrid gangs, I mean, that's the biggest thing I've seen in the last 20 years is, you know, when you talk to a blood member, you know, you used to be able to maybe whittle it down to maybe 5 big sets that this individual might be involved in. Now there's so many hybrid sets of bloods and so many factions of the bloods on the East Coast that, you know, to play catch up with it, it's craziness. And then you got fraction groups where they're just territorial in neighborhood, that they don't need permission to do things. They don't have to be sanctioned to carry out things. They're just like a bunch of reckless cowboys out here with weapons that are making their own rules and regulations. So missing that overview of the OGs, you know, the big boy on the corner that, or in the block, though, to be able to say, listen, guys, you guys got to calm down a little bit. We're bringing too much attention upon us. We got to slow down, just the way smart people used to do it, where, you know, the old saying, real gangsters move in silence. So
Right.
to see it turn into such an outlaw mentality in most of our cities, that's the biggest change I've seen now, because now it's everywhere. It's so damn watered down that some of the individuals that I'm dealing with have no reason to be involved in this game, but to them, the credibility and the clout that they're getting from this game is pulling a lot of kids into it, because, like I said, it's a very glamorized culture. Where before it was, you were in it from the neighborhood, you were in it for the right reasons, you laid low, you didn't want the attention. Today, these kids just breed on attention via social media, via whatever. So just to see how it blew up to what we have today, it's a shame. It's a shame.
Right. Well, there's always been, you know, movies, gangster movies, like, you know, that old cheesy flick, The Warriors, you know, in New York, and then there was Colors out of LA. But I think you're absolutely right. You know, that never was totally, you know, a lot of times it was far from reality. Maybe a little bit of truth in some of those flicks, but now we have social media. We didn't have internet. We were joking before I started, I was having a problem with the technology, how I learned on a chalkboard, you know, and I know you were right behind me, you talked about, I learned on the overhead, you know,
projectors, you know. So,
but now these guys, they talk on the internet. It's totally different. You're right. The only rule is really there is no rules anymore. I've seen gangs, you know, working together with other gangs, you know, it just, they really, anything goes anymore, like I said. And then the proliferation of guns and firepower is much more than it used to be back in the day.
Exactly. And just the whole loyalty aspect. I mean, the big thing on gangs, the big selling part is always that family concept, and we're loyal, you know, we don't snitch. To see what happened with that, you know, just through the RICOs, it's amazing, Gabe, because, you know, a lot of kids come up to me, man, I'm loyal, Cook, I'm not a snitch. And I just laugh and I say, loyalty today is just a tattoo. You know, everybody's got a tattoo that says loyalty on them because it's part of the, you know, the culture. But to see where this has gone, where these kids will get swept up 25 at a time, 30 at a time in RICO cases, and the reality of the loyalty all of a sudden hits.
Right. And the homeboy, you know, that they're really down for is probably did worse dirt than him, and he's gonna be the one, you know, snitching on him. He don't want to be a snitch yet. His closest homeboy he looks up to is going to be putting the case on him, pointing the finger at him. Yeah, there is really no loyalty.
So seeing that old traditional way of the machismo and the bravado of, you know, just trying to keep a close knit set or whatever you were involved in. There was loyalty. There was a lot of loyalty back in the old school days of gangs. It was the tight knit family atmosphere. Now it's just so fractured. And like I said earlier, I used the word watered down, man, because it is. It's just, you know, anybody can be a gangster today, and you got the internet thugs, and it's just a shame to see where the game is going.
Well, even with the Italian mafia, the Omerta, there's no such thing anymore. You know, they.
Yep. Well, like I said, back to that Rico.
So it has definitely changed from the top all the way down to the little kid that's trying to be somebody. And as you and I know, it doesn't matter. You don't have to be from a big major gang or powerful criminal organization. If that kid has something missing in his life, he's going to gravitate towards what he thinks being a gangster is.
And that's was always and still is, my main mission all the time when I'm out here, because the deglamorization of this culture is just very, very important, number one. And like I said, these kids with this device right here, they're a click away from anything today, from YouTube videos to Googling the history of a gang, to learning hand signs, to practicing the dance they see on TV. So it's just there's just so much peer pressure today on these young kids to make the right decision, that we really got to work with them. You got to do a lot of deglamorization of this and show them ways out.
Definitely. So let me ask you something, Cook. If you were a young person today, 12, 13 years old, and gangs were approaching them, what kind of advice would you have for that individual to try to avoid going down that path of joining a gang, going to prison, maybe ending up in the cemetery?
Yeah. Well, like I said, the first thing is talking about the reality of the lifestyle. That's the first thing, is just letting them know where A is going to lead to Z and what the end result's going to be, because there's not many wins at all going on in our communities with the lifestyle. Then you got to look in your community and say, okay, he's looking for a sense of protection. He's looking for a sense of belonging. Obviously, he wants respect. So what do we have in our community that we can guide him towards where he can find that sense of purpose? So it may be a local youth center. It may be a local gymnasium. It might be the boxing club down at the corner. He might be into dance or music. What do we have in our community? What's open in our community, so we can maybe engage him in a peer group that has the same wants and needs that he does. And he's going to get that gratification that he knows, what, I enjoy this crowd. I'm accepted by this crowd. It's leading me towards the goal that I have. I know what the streets are going to bring me to, because we're talking about that lifestyle, and he's seeing it every darn day. Because most kids involved in these groups, Gabe, they don't want to be involved in these groups, but they got to survive within that community. So it's sheeps and wolves. A lot of these individuals say, I got to wake up, I got to walk these blocks every day, Cook. I got to walk through this block when I go home every night. It's hard to say no. And I understand that peer pressure is strong. So if we can get them in safe havens, and them safe havens are basically community-oriented programming. That's why we need so much more saturated in our communities, especially the communities of poverty. Because without those positive diversions and those positive programs, listen, we would break in that environment. We got to survive. We got to eat. We got to do everything out here. And if no one's giving me that opportunity to blossom and show me that I can take the goals and chase my goals and help me develop my skill, then I'm just going to fall back to the easy way, which is I'm going to go in a corner with these guys or down in a block with these guys, and we're going to do what we have to do to make ends meet. Right. There's just a lot of peer pressure. Yeah. So Gabe, I always say it's a community effort. It's a community problem. It's not a police problem. Right. It's a family problem. When we get to the middle of the onion, the most important unit in fighting crime is not a gang unit, it's the family unit. But we've lost that family unit. We have broken families, which made broken communities. Because of these broken communities, gangs said, well, we'll be there. We got your back. We got the belonging. Don't worry about your family. So until we get these strong families to be able to make strong communities where the neighbors are now looking out for neighbors like they used to do, most neighbors are petrified. They see somebody doing something, they're just pulling their blinds down. I don't see nothing. They're afraid of what may happen if the police come to their front door. We got to stop that mindset and have communities say, what, if there's something negative going on down that block, it must be heard, and we must stand and take our own block back. But a lot of people just don't have that in them no more. A lot of families aren't strong like they used to be. You got single mothers, you got absentee parents, absentee fathers. You just got a lot of social issues that are really bleeding into this and making a big pool of blood out of what we're dealing with in our streets, because there's so many dynamics involved in what's leading to this. The causes, we just have to start doing the best work we can on some of these causes of poverty and some of these causes that these kids are making bad decisions, and hopefully fill the voids with some of the best positives that we can and fill them. And if we can do that, it's up to them to really pull up their belt straps and be their own man or woman.
Right. Well, thank you. We got to show them some options, some positive options to the gang lifestyle, and then provide opportunities. And then it's really up to them. Teach them how to make good decisions, and that's something that, like you said, sometimes parents aren't doing that. That should be the parents' job. A lot of people say, hey, the schools can't do it. The church, would instill whatever your faith is. Would instill some, morals and values. And yeah, it's I think you're right. We're all part to blame, and we got to do a better job if we want to see better results. Because these are all our kids. They're going to be affecting us one way or another. Pay a little now or pay a lot more later. That's the way I look at it. It's an investment.
We have a generation, to be honest with you, Gabe, that just doesn't have empathy. We really have to teach them empathy. They really don't care. They're so desensitized with the violence because it's become such a norm. And that's the scariest part, is because even when law enforcement comes in and they do sweeps and they take maybe 25, 30 of the heavy hitters off our streets, or one of the biggest gangs off of our community, that's fine and dandy. Suppression is needed. But my biggest concern now is, my Lord, we have a younger generation that has been watching this for the last 10 years develop into what they were. Now, all of a sudden, a void needs to be filled. And this younger generation just steps right up thinking, well, Cook, they made a mistake. We don't make mistakes. So that whole desensitization of trying to do something right, that, something wrong right, you just can't do it. So the hardest part is getting these young kids equipped with enough confidence, enough self-esteem to say, what, I'm not going to even partake in this type of a lifestyle. But, we really got a lot of work to do with the younger generation, because going back to the sensationalism of this, it's very glamorized, and we really got to work with them, because to them, this is the way out. This is what everyone's doing. It is the norm. So we got to make that normal abnormal again.
Right. So if you were a young officer coming straight out of the academy, times have changed for police. We had talked about that also before the break, before we started recording. And what kind of advice then would you have for that young officer as far as having an effective approach to dealing with young people that they might encounter on the job?
Well, it's funny because when I do our local police academy with the recruits, we have this conversation, because, I let them know, like through my lenses once again, that, everything you're going to hear from your peers, and even when you're on the road and you're training with that training officer, you're going to get a lot of opinion. So we didn't see through whatever you're hearing from the superiors or the veterans out there, because it's a different generation. And it's a different time of policing. This is a totally different time to be policing in. So open-mindedness to me is very big. And having these individuals, I tell them, when you're going to learn, make sure you learn in the field. Don't read it in a book. Don't listen to somebody's opinion. Put yourself out there. Be the person that you are genuinely, because respect earns respect and goes vice versa. So I just want these individuals out there to be themselves. Don't have no preconceived notions about anything, because I'll do a 7-hour training on gangs. But I'll tell them, listen, like we talked earlier, there's a lot of layers to this, how this individual came to the stage of making this choice to be a gang member. So be open-minded to that. And if you want to get respect out on these streets, like I said, just be yourself, because if you're not yourself, you're going to be just labeled and classified like the rest of the law enforcement seems to be these days. And they're not going to see the human side of you. They must know that you're a family man. Let them know if you have children. Talk to them as if they're your neighbors. Just be real with them, because real recognizes real, Gabe. If you're real with it, real recognizes real so much out here that, don't be afraid to be different than the average officer out there. If they're going to be strict and by the books and just be that suppression-minded officer, step out of that for a minute and let them see that you're human. I tell a lot of the young officers to get involved in some of the youth programs in your area, be it Little League, coaching Pop Warner, football. Start working with the kids in your community. Because if you're in your community, invested in your community, then they're going to accept you as a community member. But if you're living out in the hill towns, you're, 45-minute drive to work every day, and the only time they see you is with a badge and a gun, then what do you think they're going to think of you? Right. So, you're not shopping in their shopping malls. If you're not walking in their supermarkets, if they don't see you as a normal individual, it's going to be a harder job. So I just tell them to humanize yourself. Make sure they let them know that this is a job. You put your pants in, you put your shoes on, you strap that belt on and that star or that badge, and that's your job. That's what you get paid to do, to serve and protect. But you got to be able to separate that and let them see that besides a job, you're just like them. You're a coach, you're a father, you're a brother, you're a husband, you know, whatever you are, let them know the human side of you, and don't be afraid to share that information with a lot of these kids out there, because they're looking for positive, you know, conversations back and forth, especially with law enforcement. It's long overdue. So I just want these recruits, and I want these young guys that are coming out these days just to go out there and be themselves, and all these preconceived notions you may have about how I should do the job. No, learn out there, see what your community is, put your finger on the pulse of the streets. You'll feel that pulse. And once you feel the pulse of the streets, you're smart enough to make wise decisions.
Thank you. That's great advice, and I hope officers out there are listening to that. And we have a lot of subscribers that are law enforcement, as well as former gang members. You know, people are trying to rebuild their lives, re-entering society. So we have a variety of people that watch our channel here, and we appreciate you watching and supporting us. Now, here's a little bit of a tougher maybe question, Cook. If you were a politician today, okay, dealing with all the things, it's tough to be a politician too. We all got tough jobs. Dealing with all the things that you know about the criminal justice system today, as far as what's working and what's not working, what kind of policies and laws would you implement to improve the system?
Oh my goodness, buddy. I mean, we could be here for 45 minutes on that topic.
Right.
I mean, just with the current issues, let me just delve into that, because doing programming like I do for our probation department, because my 9 to 5 is working with the probation department, doing alternatives to incarceration programming, you know. And because of a lot of the rate, we have a raise the age thing in New York State now, where they've raised the age of kids getting incarcerated. We have a lot of reform laws with the bail reform. That's affected us so much and affected our community so much that we did it. I think our state was a little knee jerk on how fast we went about this bail reform. And we're just trying to plug dikes in a wall now, and just these little holes, because the reservoir is about to break because of what we're dealing with. There needs to be more in-depth studies on how to do bail reform, because we have a lot of individuals that are RUS, released under supervision. And the probation department is obviously in charge of doing that supervision. The parole's involved in doing that supervision. Some individuals they're not ready for that. They're not ready to invest in making better choices. They're not ready to change their ways. And coming from somebody who so front end prevention, intervention, you know, it's hard for me to say that, but it's the reality after 30 years of doing my program, is some individuals just aren't going to change. So you need to have that hammer. You need to have that show of force that, listen, if this individual wants to just act so abnormal in our community, committing crimes, that's why the prison system was there. Yes, we'll look for mental health help. We'll look for anything we can to help this individual. But if they choose to be involved in negative behavior and criminal lifestyle, then you have to eliminate them from the streets. And what we're seeing now is a lot of individuals that should be eliminated from the streets that are now walking our streets. Some of them might have a GPS monitor from one of the agencies that's tracking them, but most of them don't. So they really got to think about these reform laws a little better on who you're letting, you know, allowed back into these communities, which affects a bigger community than they think. It's sort of like throwing that stone into the pond. The ripple effects are becoming bigger and bigger now. So they really got to do a better job just on evaluating who's ready for community corrections, who should stay within the facility in corrections, and stop, you know, just bending these laws to allow people to be on these streets, because the community impact has been detrimental.
Right. Well, you know, I always had a problem in corrections when I'd watch a guy been locked down 20, 30 years in a SHU program, 23-hour lockdown, and then they'd cut him loose to the street because he's maxed out with no step down programs, no skills. The world has totally changed in the last 20, 30 years. He's already destined for failure. You know, soon after he gets out that door. I mean, and it's no wonder then that some of these guys commit atrocious crimes, and the public's like, hey, you know, this guy just, you know, he was out a week and committed a murder or something. It's just, to me, it's just mind boggling that we can't do a better job of a step down program and teaching new skills, new coping skills. And if they can't, you know, pass that next phase, then, you know, there's no get out of jail free card.
And like I said, that's the biggest thing, is what we try to do, and what we've been trying to do is have those wraparound services. But if the individual doesn't want to buy into the positives, you know, if they're just so locked in that my lifestyle is criminal behavior, then like I said, there's a fine line there, and they gotta start paying more attention to that fine line, because these individuals, like I said, what they're doing in our communities and the knowledge from inside that they're bringing back to the younger generation, they shouldn't be learning these tricks of the trade. They shouldn't be around people that
I think you're definitely right in that point. There's some guys who don't want to change, not ready for change, and we're throwing a lot of money at them when we have other people that can't get help finding a job, finding housing, that really have a lot of potential to turn their lives around, and they're homeless. You know, and it's sad. We got to definitely do a better job in reentry. I think that's probably the worst job that corrections does right now, is doing a better job of that. And that's no you know, that's not to dog out, you know, the parole and probation officers out there, because they got a tough job, and they got, you know, sometimes hundreds of guys on their caseload. There's no way they can keep track of everybody at one time, but we got to do a better job in that regard. I agree. So thank you for sharing all that with us, brother. We're about running out of time, but is there anything else you'd like to share before we close?
To be honest with you, buddy, like I said, it's great seeing you and hearing from you. I'm glad you're healthy and happy. You know, when I see you on the book and I see you out there doing your thing, I'm envious, because you know, I've yet to be to the island. So someday, hopefully, we can visit and chop things up in the physical. I appreciate you supporting me all the time too, my man. It means a lot to me. You know, your constant support over all these years, especially in the field that I do. It means a lot to me. You know, professionals like you, it really means a lot. This platform, hopefully we can just grow it, because it's good for people to be able to talk, and like each one teach one is the motto. So hopefully people can watch these things, grab a little nugget, put it in their belts, and help them be a better person, and help them make better choice and stay safer, and just you know, make us and build us a better world out here, my man. So I appreciate you.
All right. Well, the respect and admiration is mutual. If you ever here on the Big Island out here, yeah, definitely look me up. Please give my regards, hugs to your wife and daughter, and send our aloha. And we'll give you the local tour if you're ever out here. Okay.
Oh, it's all good. Same to you.
All right, brother.
Give the family my love, man, and stay blessed. Okay.
All right. You too, brother.
All right. Peace.